Hi, Roger Linn here. In this video, I'm going to talk about creating expressive MPE sounds for LinnStrument's official synth, Surge XT. Surge is a wonderful synth. What I love about it is the wide variety of complex and beautiful sounds it can make by virtue of its many methods of sound generation. Plus, it's amazing that it's free, maintained by such a talented and passionate group of good people. In this video, I won't dig into the basics of using Surge because that's covered in other tutorials on their site. I will talk about making MPE sounds and specifically about digging into Surge's unique sound generation methods, using as examples the sounds in the LinnStrument MPE library that is included within Surge. Here goes. Here's the Surge XT screen. The first thing you want to do is to turn on the MPE button, which is right up here. And what this does is it turns every sound in Surge's extensive library of many different sounds, hundreds there, maybe 1,000 or more, into MPE sounds, in the sense that you can play them from an MPE controller and get simultaneous pitch bends and such. The only problem with it is that the vast majority of these sounds in the library, as in most synthesizers, are optimized for MIDI piano, keyboard, single channel type sounds. And so they won't respond to Y-axis and they won't respond well to pressure control. But at least they'll be polyphonic sounds. You can play them and do things like 2 or 3 part harmony with the independent pitch bends of as pitch slides of LinnStrument. Notice in the modulation section that there are modulators specifically for MPE. There's MPE pressure and MPE timbre. And these modulators extract from the MPE instrument the MPE pressure, Z-axis, or MPE timbre, the Y-axis, and you can assign those modulators to any of the modulation destinations in Surge. So a good way to create a new expressive sound, a good LinnStrument compatible sound, is to start with one of the sounds in the LinnStrument MPE library. That is under third-party patches, LinnStrument MPE. And as you can see, there are subfolders for bass, brass, guitars, keys, leads, organs, pads, percussion, plucks, strings, box, voices, and winds. And I'm saving the best for last, which is winds, the sounds created by ThoughtForm, one of the best creators for LinnStrument sounds. So what I'm going to start off with, though, is in the brass section, I'm going to give you the sound called Miles trumpet. And this is interesting. It basically sounds like a very nasal muted trumpet, the sound that a mute on a trumpet gives you. And I call it Miles trumpet, but it could be anybody playing a muted trumpet sound. And that's interesting. The way that's created is not with any of the normal oscillators, but if you look over here in the oscillator section, you can see here a drop-down menu that allows you to select a variety of different oscillator types. Classic is sawtooth and square. Modern, sawtooth, square, triangle, and sine. I'm not sure why sawtooth is in both places. Wavetable, window, another type, and you can learn about these individual in the documentation. Sine, FM with 2 oscillators, FM 3 oscillators, string, which is what's called a carpless straw, and I'll talk about that later, and another one called twist, which is what this is, one alias, sample and hold noise, but there's so many, it's too many to go around this time, but I'm going to just spotlight some of the ones that I found interesting. Now, the one that this sound, the Miles trumpet, used is twist. So twist is selected here, and then it has a sub-menu called Engine, which allows you to select a variety of different ways to get crazy, wonderful sounds. And this one particularly that we're using is called Vowel Speech. And this is normally done for creating human vowel type formats. But in this case, we're just leaving it in one particular tone, and that gives us the sound, coincidentally, of a muted trumpet. So if I take that sound, though, and I move some of these sliders like speak, or species, or segment, You can get so many different wonderful sounds in there. Okay, another one I'm going to talk about is the French horn blip. This is a sound that was popular in the 80s. It's very simple. It's a subtractive sound. It consists of two sawtooth oscillators in unison, and one of them has the pitch at the beginning of the note modulated up and then down by an envelope generator very quickly, and this creates the sound something like a French horn or the initial attack of a trumpet. And this was used there was a song in the 80s by the band Toto called 99, and it had a solo. Let's see what it went like. Something like that, but it was a fun sound. And then let's see. Next, we have in guitars, we have a sound in the guitars folder called feedback guitar, and this is created by a fellow named Thoughtform, a very good sound creator and very good player. It's called feedback guitar because if you tilt your y-axis forward, you get a feedback sound. So I'm going to play a little bit. But if I tilt my finger forward, interesting sound. And the way that does that is to take a wavetable. WT stands for wavetable. And there's a table, I'm not sure where he got that one, if he put it in himself or if it's one of the stock ones, but it's called Ibanez. And then what he does is he uses the y-axis to index through that table. And that's used by the slider called morph. And you see it's taking a single period sample from within this sample, creating a single period waveform from within this sample. So when he tilts forward, it's merely using a different period within that waveform. And it's a very powerful one. He uses that extraordinarily well in some sounds in the winds category, which I'll demonstrate later. Another one, this is one I created called Les Paul Bridge and Filter. Les Paul Bridge and Chorus. And in this case, it sounds just like a sort of a twangy James Bond guitar. And this is very simple. It's basically just a a pulse waveform, but just the right pulse width modulation, and then the right resonance to the filter, and it creates a very electric guitar type sound. And then the chorus adds to it and gives it a little bit of that James Bond sound. Let's see. Next here we have overdriven guitar, and this is right here. This is one I created, and in this case, it uses the string generator, and this is an oscillator or a sound generation method. I think from the 70s called Carpless Strong, and it's basically a forerunner of waveguide synthesis. This is a very powerful thing built into Surge. And what I'm doing is taking that sound and through a filter and then running it through a guitar amp type distortion. Now, what I did in that case, you can play along with this Carpless Strong algorithm or the string algorithm, and what it is it's a resonator. In a moment, I won't go too much into that, but it's using a variety of different noise sources. In this case, I took a burst of noise at the beginning. It causes the oscillator to resonate, and then it has a low-pass filter in its feedback path, which causes it to lose harmonics over time, and you can control that by the decay. And then the way I created the distortion is using their distortion effect module. And what this allows me to do is to have, it's very nice for creating guitar amp type distortion because it has pre-EQ, a soft distortion, and post-EQ. And that's very nice because the pre-EQ mimics the treble boost of the preamp and of a guitar amp, what's called the tone stack. The soft distortion emulates the soft way that a tube distorts. And the post EQ allows you to filter off, a low-pass filter, to filter off the highs in the same way that a woofer of a guitar amp works. So it creates a fairly good guitar amp distortion effect. Although I must say that in Surge, it's hard through the synthesis to get as good as of a electric guitar sound, string sound, as with a sample. But this does work pretty well. Let's see. And here's another example. This is overdriven guitar plus wah, in which case the y-axis position of LinnStrument is used to change the wah-wah pedal position. The next sound is acoustic piano, and this is under the keys section, acoustic grand. And it's a very interesting sound. It's purely done by synthesis, and here's what it sounds like. Now, this is very interesting, the way this is created. All it is something called a resonant comb filter. The same thing as a flanger or a chorus. It's a delay of a signal combined with the original signal, but the delayed signal is only just a few milliseconds long, or very, very short. In other words, not that you can perceive the delay, but when you mix them together, it creates a series of harmonically related notch filters, frequencies that are taken out of the output. And it gives it a certain character. And that's what happens. A resonant flanger is a comb filter, and you can hear this shifting of sound of timbres through from treble to bass. And it's a very effective sound and very computationally simple to achieve compared to having many, many different filters. So this resonant comb filter, it's like turning the resonance up on a low-pass filter, except you have all these notches. And it won't make any sound when the resonance is all the way up. So you have to put something into it to get it to resonate. And what we're doing in this case is putting in a noise source. So all that is noise coming in and causing those notches to resonate, and it happens to sound, since they are harmonically related like a string, and then it decays over time after the initial impulse goes away. And I find it fascinating how well that works to simulate an acoustic piano. Okay, and next keys sound is clavy or clavinet. Now this one's interesting. This uses this oscillator called string. And what this is this method called Karplus Strong. And Karplus Strong is a wonderfully efficient method of generating string-like sounds. And it uses a noise burst or a variety of different excitation forces to resonate this Karplus Strong oscillator, which is similar to the resonant comb filter in many ways internally. And so all I'm doing is taking a particular burst noise at the beginning and using that to excite the Karplus Strong oscillator. And it works out very well to give you that clavinet string sound. So then next comes on the Rhodey, or Fender Rhodes type electric piano and keys. And that is, hold on, I got away from the, here it is. This is one I created, and it's supposed to emulate a Fender Rhodes piano. It's something between that and a DX7 Rhodes sound, but it has a nice little tie-in sound at the beginning. So let's move on to the folder called Leads, and the first one is called Screaming Octaves. And this one's kind of interesting. I created this one, and what it does is it uses pressure to go from the fundamental to an octave above that. I'm increasing pressure now. But the other thing is when I move my finger forward and backward in the y-axis, it modulates the frequency of a comb filter, which we talked about earlier. Here it is, moving forward and backward. So it sounds a little bit like a chorus, and that's what a chorus is. It's a comb filter that has its frequency moving up and down to give you that chorusing effect. But in this case, you have complete control over it with your finger. If I move it to the back, or I move it to the forward, and if I move it, I get that chorus effect. Now, there's other modulation in this particular sound along with it, so it's a little bit confusing. But it's a very good method of being able to change the timbre of a sound while keeping all frequencies there. Okay, so I'm going to move on to Snarling Cat. And this one is just an oscillator sync, which you're probably familiar with. So in this case, it's their classic oscillator, and sawtooth is selected, and then it has an oscillator sync slider, so I can just move that. And I'm using y-axis from MPE, from the LinnStrument, to be able to modulate that. So next I'm going to go into the organs category, and this is an interesting one. In this case, there are two things in surge that are interesting. One of them is that if I tilt my finger forward, I move from a mellow organ sound to effectively like the drawbars being pulled out. In this case, let's do a chord. So pressure gives me volume of the organ sound. And then y-axis gives me pulling the drawbars out. Now what it uses is an oscillator type called alias. And in alias, there is something called shape, and I can choose the selection called additive. And this is very interesting. If I edit that, it gives me little drawbars. And I'm not sure why it isn't changing, but at any rate, I think it's because I have the wrong oscillator on that I'm listening to. But at any rate, it allows you to create a sound just like you would with the Hammond organs. I think it's 9 drawbars for the first 9 harmonics, but all the way up into 16 harmonics. And then what I'm using to create the y-axis pulling out of the drawbars is I'm just taking that full sound and then running it through a low-pass filter. And the low-pass filter frequency is controlled by my y-axis. Oh, I think I had to just restrike this note in order to get those. I see. I had to play a new note in order to have it the sliders recognized. But it's a great way of getting, particularly for Hammond organ sounds, or to play with creating sounds from the harmonic series. And there are 2 organs there with different drawbars out. Let's see. Now, pads, there's an interesting one that I created that I like called Hammered Strings. Let's see, where did it go? Whoops. No, I didn't get it. This is, there's so many sub-menus here, it becomes a little bit tricky. Hammered Strings, there we go. And this one's kind of interesting. Now, this is actually 3 oscillators at once. I'm going to take 2 of them off, so we're just hearing the first one. Now this one again uses this twist oscillator, and the engine within twist that it uses is inharmonic string. So if you listen to this, I'm going to vary the volume with my finger. So what it's doing is it's using sort of random hammers to strike this software string. And the string is something like a arcopla strong, or used in the string oscillator, and you can control the decay of that. And in fact, what I'm doing is, in the y-axis, if I tilt my finger forward, I'm modulating the decay time. Forward, back, forward. Now this is interesting, this inharmonicity. In this case, oh, this is maybe it. You can control that randomness and how intense it is. But it's a lot of fun to play with. Okay, and then moving along here, let's see. Pulse wave plus filter. This is one I always like to demonstrate LinnStrument with, because it's the absolute simplest and most basic synthesis sound you can. It is a pulse wave form through a filter. No envelopes, no VCAs. All the volume is controlled by your finger, the envelope by your finger, controlling the filter frequency. And normally it is below the fundamental. When I press down on the instrument, I open the filter up, letting the signal pass. And all that is the oscillator here, which is a classic pulse wave form. And what I'm doing is altering the pulse width, the shape of the oscillator, with the y-axis. So as I tilt my finger forward and backward, and as I change pressure, I change filter frequency. And this is a great example of the power of expressive control, because under a MIDI keyboard, this would sound like. But if you play it under the expressive control, you okay, so moving along here, we have now percussion, filtered noise drums. Now this one is kind of interesting for use with LinnStrument's arpeggiator. So if I play filtered noise drums, and then I just play 3 notes, one up towards the high end of the instrument, and I turn the arpeggiator on. And then if I tilt my finger forward, I get a little longer decay. And then if I do the same thing down in the lower left corner, I can add a bass drum with the same decay control. And then in the middle, somewhere between the two, I can get a snare type sound. And then if I were to assign low row to arpeggiator, the low row now allows me to step between the different arpeggiator rates. So for the hi-hat, I'm holding my finger on one of the higher pads now while the arpeggiator's on. It's by default, it's set to 16th swing, half swing rather. And then if I just, on the low row, take my finger and press on it and then move it 1 to the right, or 2 to the right. And if I do that while I'm playing very quickly, So that's kind of an interesting one. And then see also is long decay toms. And I like this one only because this was the sound that was so popular in the 80s, or actually in the 70s, I guess, with the Syndrome, I think it was called. They created a very good tom sound by just taking a sweeping downswept sine wave combined with noise through a low-pass filter that's downswept. Whoops, I had the arpeggiator still on. But that combination of noise and the downswept sine really creates a fairly good impression of a tom-tom sound, particularly with some of the ambience in the room. Now let's see, next time I'm going to go to the plucked folder, and in this case I've got a koto. This uses that Karpla strong algorithm, the string oscillator in Surge, and I think it's fairly convincing. And if I strike it toward the top of the y-axis, I got a longer decay. If I strike it near the bottom of the y-axis, I get a shorter decay. And then I use that just to modulate the stiffness of the string on this slider here. Once again, in Surge, all of these different, this huge number of different oscillator methods has a variety of different ways to modify it, so you get so much customization. Now I'm going to go now into the Vox folder, and the Vox is voice. So you have a number of different sounds here, talking sound. Here's adult, alien, child, or young adult. So this is the twist oscillator again, sort of a catch-all for all weird forms of synthesis, and the engine selected is vowels and speech. So I can take that and I can change the parameters like speak or species or segment. And that's what I'm modulating with the y-axis. It's just marvelous fun to play with. And those filters are also useful for other things, like, for example, the Miles trumpet that I had done earlier. Okay, so leaving the best for last is the Winds folder. And I'm going to start, most of these are created by Thoughtform, who's a wonderful player and also created some marvelous sounds. And these ones that he created are all using the wavetable oscillator, shown as WT here. And what he uses, once again, this is a sample, and then it allows you to index through that sample to select a single period waveform within it. And he uses the y-axis to move through that. So in the dudek here, or duduk rather, I love the way that sounds. It's very, very musical, and the way he plays it is just marvelous. So if I select some other ones, I like this one called Beer Flute. So the y-axis is actually modulating through that waveform. It doesn't animate as you play, but it does it as you move the morph slider. And he also has some noise in there to give it a wonderful windy sort of character. Another one is bass ocarina. This has a marvelous sound. As you move forward, you get this very interesting sound. And by the way, on these sounds, he likes to play it legato as a solo sound, but if you want to, so it doesn't make chords. But if you want to play chords, just change the play mode from mono to poly. Another one he's created is, moon flute. And all that timbral change is coming from the y-axis. Now, another one, and by the way, there's many other sounds that he's created in this library, and you should check them all out. But another one, this is one I created, which is one I've had since the beginning with LinnStrument, which is overdrive harmonica. And this one's kind of interesting. I'll play it first. It's that honk sound that's sometimes used to describe it. And all this is a classic waveform, a sawtooth waveform, and in which case the y-axis is used to control the shape of the waveform. But most importantly, there's a strong resonance with the low-pass filter, and that goes into Serge's distortion algorithm. And what I'm doing is I'm using that same thing I described before. It's like a guitar amp. And when the blues harmonica players would play through an amp, they play through a guitar amp with distortion. And so what I'm using is it has pre-EQ, just like the tone stack, bass, middle, and treble on a guitar amplifier, soft distortion, just like the tubes, and then post-EQ, which I'm using to cut down the treble in the same way the woofer of a guitar amplifier cuts off the treble and gives you a warmer character of the distortion created in the power amp. And in this case, I'm using a very strong resonant EQ before the distortion. And I can change that frequency and its bandwidth and such. And then that goes into the distortion, and then I have the highs cut. So it sounds more like the more mellow sound of a 12-inch woofer, which is what a guitar speaker is. So that's a nice overview of the sounds and telling you a little bit how it's done. I invite you all to look into all these different synthesis methods, and in particular the ones like the inharmonic string, the string oscillator, the twist oscillator, which has all these marvelous engines in there, and try each one of those out. They're just wonderful, very, very creative, and it's just this basket of tricks that are just marvelous, and I'm sure you'll come up with some marvelous sounds from it. Thank you very much for watching, and thank you for either owning a LinnStrument or having the interest in one. Bye now.